So we've got this video here from Hasan. It's called "It's So Over." I'm really curious to see what this one is about.
Worst possible outcome for 2028. Tucker Carlson runs on an anti-Israel platform in 2028, and the Democrats put forward a pro-liberal Zionist, pro-defending America's military might.
Does he really think that Israel is going to be like the defining voting issue in the 2028 election? No. I mean, it's going to be quality of life. And I don't think that, we give aid to Israel is going to be enough to get people to sort of decide not to vote for any pro-Israel candidate. You also have to consider the fact that support for Israel is extremely popular. Like, hold on, let me see. Well, actually, you know what? Because of the Israel-Hamas war, it looks like support has dropped. A new survey shows that just 32% of U.S. voters view Israel positively, down from 47% in 2023. That's actually really surprising. I mean, I guess Hamas is doing what they wanted to do. But hold on. I do think that most people support Israel's right to exist. Hold on. So it says here, this is from Israel on Campus Coalition. Now, this data might be skewed somewhat. A broad majority of U.S. adults, over 80%, support Israel's right to defend itself. So, even let's say it's skewed, bump it down by let's say 20% or so out of the total support. That's still 61% of people who still support Israel's right to exist. So, when we're talking about Zionism, which is, believing that the state of Israel should exist, at least how it seems to be defined by most people, seems like a lot of people are still on board with that agenda. So this idea that, you got a bunch of single issue Israel voters or Palestine voters running around here is quite silly.
You want to know the worst possible outcome for 2028? Tucker Carlson runs on an anti-Israel platform in 2028, and the Democrats put forward a pro-liberal Zionist.
Also, Tucker Carlson is not winning a general election. I don't know who you're talking to, but he's not. He's too polarizing. He says crazy things. He cozies up to foreign leaders who are the Axis powers, let's say, not allies, but Axis powers, right? Cozying up to Vladimir Putin, chumming it up in Moscow, partying like it's 1999 or whatever. That type of stuff is not going to win. I will say this. Whoever wins elections, it's pretty much a race for Riz, right? It's a popularity contest, right? When was the last time the least cool candidate lost the general election? I mean, Donald Trump was unilaterally cooler than Kamala Harris, hands down. Let's see. I will say Joe Biden did have a little bit of a cool factor from being vice president, during the Joe Biden, the Barack Obama administration. I think that in the Barack Obama administration, Joe Biden seemed pretty cool. He seemed like a chill dude. And I think a lot of that sort of stuck with him. And that's why he ended up winning that election in 2020. 2016, Donald Trump, absolutely cooler than Hillary Clinton. 2012 and 2008, Barack Obama, cooler than Mitt Romney, cooler than John McCain. So if you just go down the list, it's always the cool, chill dudes who end up winning. All you have to do is be extremely likable and say what the people want to hear, and then basically you're a winner. And I don't think that's Tucker Carlson. I think that Tucker Carlson certainly has his audience. He certainly has people who, hear what he has to say, and they're absolutely on board with him. And, his message resonates with him. But still, I just don't think that Tucker Carlson's rhetoric is appealing to mainstream Americans. Just like people in the middle of the aisle and people left of center, I just don't think that he has what it takes to win an election. I think that the 2028 election is going to come down to these two individuals. On the Democrat side, you're going to have Gavin Newsom. On the Republican side, you're probably going to either have J.D. Vance or Ron DeSantis. And I think that Gavin Newsom is going to win, right? Because he is the coolest person, or the chillest person, who is in the running for president. I don't think you can list anyone else who has more of a cool factor than him. Even some people who I would love to see run for president. I personally think that Thomas Massie would make an amazing president. I would love to see him be president of the United States. I don't think that he's as cool as Gavin Newsom. Marco Rubio could give him a run for his money. I think Marco Rubio comes off as a little bit more of like a statesman or a little bit more presidential. So he sort of has that going in his favor. But I just think that Gavin Newsom is so personable. He's so likable. I know that he has like these massive scandals because he's running California into the ground. However, I think that the way the media has treated Donald Trump has lowered the standards dramatically for any president. So normal things that would ordinarily be scandals no longer are scandals in the eyes of many Americans now. So I think that that's going to allow Gavin Newsom to get away with a lot more than he would have been able to if he ran, like, let's say in 2012. Like Gavin Newsom, with his current record, current persona, current personality, in running for president in 2012, couldn't win. Running in 2028, absolutely could win.
Pro defending America's military might candidate. Tucker Carlson wins by Ronald Reagan numbers, not only by winning over the MAGA crowd, which he has.
I will say though, it'd be crazy if Tucker Carlson won. The thing is, like, I actually think that he is a foreign asset. Honestly, like under Russia, controlled by Putin or something. I think that just makes sense if you look at how he moves. And so to have our country actually run by a foreign asset, not talking about Donald Trump. Donald Trump is not a foreign asset. It would be really weird and unfortunate.
Has complete control over, in my opinion. But also on top of that, a lot of independents and maybe even some liberals. The Democratic Party is done. The next wave of fascism is here. Like the more accelerated version of fascism is here.
I actually agree, because Tucker Carlson is has a soft spot for Axis powers. In my opinion, is a foreign asset for Russia or Putin or whatever. I actually do think that Tucker Carlson is the type of person who, if you put him in power, put him in as president of the United States, he actually might, put fascism in place in the United States of America. Him and Ron DeSantis are like the only two people that I'd be worried about when it comes to being fascist presidents of the United States.
He actually does, unironically, put the mass deportations regime in place. That's what I'm afraid of.
He says he's running against me for president. I almost want to run for president just to debate Ted Cruz.
So that video clip, the little text there. The video is posted by Cesspool Online. The quote is, Tucker Carlson, Ted Cruz says he's running against me for president. I almost want to run for president just to debate Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz lost all his aura. He ran for president, seemed pretty cool, then became governor or whatever, senator in Texas, and then has done basically nothing. Meanwhile, cost of living has slowly risen as the population density increases, and you've got an influx of now, and then of course, on top of that, you've got an influx of Democrats from California, who of course are going to go in and slowly turn Texas into another California. Ted Cruz has done nothing to show for the time that he's been in office, in my opinion. Like Uvalde, he didn't do anything to help with Uvalde. He didn't, make any proclamations or condemning the police response or anything. So, like, to me, Ted Cruz has sort of become useless. Ted Cruz, it's really weird, because one of my biggest gripes about the 2016 election was that Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio ran against each other, because they had basically identical platforms, except for the fact that Ted Cruz opposed the amnesty and Marco Rubio supported it. If you take the votes that they got during the primaries and combined them, they would have crushed Donald Trump in the primaries and become president of the United States. But unfortunately, that's not what happened. But it's really interesting looking at the career trajectories. Ted Cruz became a senator and went on a podcast. Marco Rubio is now the Secretary of State. And if you look historically about who political parties try to prop up, secretaries of state are pretty high up there. That makes him a lot more of an enticing choice for future president of the United States than someone like Ted Cruz, who's just been a senator for several years and basically done nothing and, has a podcast or whatever.
Cruz, because I think it would go.
Wait, is Ted Cruz actually running for president? Let me see. I hope he's not. So basically it's something that he's bandied about, but he, hasn't made any solid statements.
About the way it went last time, and for my part, I deeply enjoyed it, which is why I've never tweeted about it.
Tucker Carlson versus Gavin Newsom is unlimited Tucker Carlson victory, by the way. I'm letting you know right now, everyone's gonna be like, but what about trans people?
That's a horrible prediction. To say that Tucker Carlson would lose to Gavin Newsom?
You know, right now, everyone's gonna be like, but what about trans people? Okay, they're gonna be like,
No,
but Gavin Newsom is like
no.
pro-gay. Gavin Newsom will see.
This guy is it's such an echo chamber. He's talking as if the president of the United States is going to be handpicked by the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. That's not true. When you're trying to make predictions about who is going to win the next election, I'm talking general election for president of the United States. You can't be like, oh, well, who cares most about trans people? Or like, oh, who cares most about Israel? Like, come on. Come on. People care about these like tabletop issues. They want to put food on their table. They want to put gas in their car, and they want to go on vacation. They want to look at all the presidential candidates and be like, okay, which one of you guys is going to do these three things for me, or at least make it as easy as possible for me to do these three things? No one's going to look at them and be like, well, you know what? Our economy is in the tank. We're in war overseas. But you know what I care about most? Trans people. Like, you're not going to see that from the mainstream American voter. That's just not going to be the case. This guy is going to make some of the worst political predictions in this upcoming general election cycle. I might actually want to keep an eye on this guy.
Signal that he's like also in favor of limiting the pro-trans sentiment from his side because he wants to appeal to the mythical moderate center. Oof. Tucker Carlson's like, you're Israel first. You're an attack dog. You're a lapdog for Israel. I can't even tell what your positions are. One day you say Israel's an apartheid. You get a boss call from all of the Israel lobbyists. And next day you come out and you say, actually, Israel's not an apartheid.
See, like, Hasan Piker and all of his viewers may vote for Tucker Carlson over Gavin Newsom. Like, maybe they're single issue voters. Maybe, you know, Israel is their abortion. It's like, oh, we just got to get rid of it. We're this single issue voter. But I just don't think that's going to be the mindset of most American voters. And I don't know why he thinks that's the case either, unless he only spends time listening to people who agree with him and people in his chat. Like, if that's the case, then sure, I understand it. But still, I just don't think that take makes sense at all.
Americans need someone who actually can stand on moral principles. And as a Christian, I think genocide is unconscionable. What's going on? You see, Tucker, you're being quite anti-Semitic. No, I love Jews. I love Jews. I can't stand what Israel has done to my Jewish friends. What's going on? Ronald Reagan victory condition. Okay, spoiler alert.
That's stupid.
Win that
this is like one of the. Maybe I hope this is satirical. Actually. You know what? I'm gonna pass. This might be satirical. I'll just let this play.
Battle. Tucker Carlson wins that battle.
Everybody knows the only reason we're having this war is because Israel wants it. This is their last chance, they believe. This presidency is the last presidency where they're going to have unequivocal bipartisan support.
This is why I've been trying to urge Democrats.
Interesting take. I mean, that might be the case. That might be part of it. I mean, I've heard inklings and rumors that, you know, the United States didn't want to go into this conflict, but Israel did some strikes, and so America had to issue some support. I do believe that America did probably want to do some sort of strike. You know, Iran's been developing nuclear weapons. We told them to stop. We bombed them, and they instead chose to hide their nuclear weapons, stop cooperating with the IAEA, and then just continue their missile program as if nothing had ever happened. Now they're very brazen about being like, oh yeah, we've got nuclear weapons. You know, you can't stop us. Meanwhile, they're getting bombed into oblivion, and a lot of their missile sites are being destroyed and stuff. But that's neither here nor there. I just think that, you know, Israel kind of pushed America on timing. This is not when we wanted to do these strikes, nor how we wanted to do them. Not to say that our strikes have been a total failure, but I do kind of agree that, you know, Israel at the very least has pushed us into this conflict.
Behind closed doors and publicly to take a stronger stance against Israel. You cannot have a guy like Tucker Carlson lead the conversation on Israel. The Democrats, as a national party, have to universally oppose Israel. If you don't do that, a guy like Tucker Carlson, who has been leading the conversation for normies on the issue of Israel, will come out and destroy you. You can't play catch up by the time the election comes around where you're like, oh, well, we also want to do defensive weapons to Israel, but no offensive weapons. No, you'll lose. You'll lose 100%. Whoever is first to market with a convincing and earnest anti-Israel position will win. It does not matter how much AIPAC is spending right now.
That's not true. That's not true. Who told this guy that? That's not even close to being the truth. What is he talking about? What is this?
Whoever is first to market with a convincing and earnest anti-Israel position.
This is so dumb.
It does not matter how much.
This is so dumb. I don't understand it. This take at all, this mindset, unless you think that the president of the United States is going to be dictated by the progressive wing of the Democratic Party. This makes no sense at all.
AIPAC is spending right now. Even Nita Allen is a great example of this. A short-lived campaign that came out of nowhere, okay, was almost capable of taking out a multiple-term incumbent, Valerie Foushee, that was getting the backing from every party instrument, and also on top of that was getting support from AIPAC subsidiaries too. It pains me to say this, but I think a lot of leftists would. No,
I think a lot of that is progressives tend not only to speak about Israel, they also tend to speak about quality of life. That's why I think Bugazela's campaign appealed to so many people. She was looking around and saying, hey, we need to make things more affordable. We need to make things more accessible. Regardless of whether or not I think her policies were good or bad, she was speaking to real pain that voters are feeling. Most progressives do that. And I think that's why they're successful. Not even necessarily their policies. They represent a change from the old guard of standard stock liberal Democrats, who, by the way, when you're incumbent, people will sort of blame you for whatever's going on, regardless of whether or not it's your fault. So there's that factor as well.
Vote for Tucker Carlson over Gavin Newsom. Yes. I think a lot of normies would vote for Tucker Carlson over Gavin Newsom. 100%. I'm fearful of this reality. You can't make Tucker Carlson be the convincing anti-Israel guy. This takes time. Democrats are already losing this battle.
Every Thomas Massey, and there's a whole army of them coming at some point because everyone can see what's going on. And you can shut down X, and you can just shut down the internet. You can be like Great Britain and arrest people who protest Israel, but attitudes are not going to revert to what they were 5 years ago. Sorry. And they know this. So this is their last chance.
He's right, by the way. He is completely right on this. The real issue.
I do think that they could, but, the Israel-Hamas war would have to end. And you would have to give it at least like 10 or 15 years for people to kind of forget all the things that Israel did during the war against Hamas, for that sentiment to be built back up. Because look, if Israel is staying inactive, people will remember just how bad Israel's enemies actually are. And so, honestly, in my opinion, the reason why a lot of secular Americans support Israel is not necessarily because they like Israel so much or they find Israel so appealing, but it's because their enemies are so they're extremely against Western values. I'm trying to use kind of some more tactical language than I think Asmongold used when he said this, but because Israel has such Western values in comparison to a lot of the other nations in the Middle East, a lot of Americans just look down on those values and be like, why haven't you guys sort of, for lack of a better term, caught up in terms of women's rights, for example, LGBT rights, for example, free speech. Even Democrats believe in having, free speech to some degree. I may not think that it's full free speech, but it's some freedom to say some things, at least. A lot more than what you would see in a lot of Middle Eastern countries. But yeah, there are so many rights. There's a litany of rights that Western nations have, including Israel. Now, Israel doesn't have nearly as many of those rights as the United States does, or even certain European countries do. But they're still better when it comes to being democratic than other nations in the region. So I think that if Israel stops doing as many, bad or important things, or just things that, have really bad PR, and people remember just how bad their enemies are, then support for Israel will rise once again.
Issue here is that Tucker is the one saying it. Why aren't Democrats the ones saying it? Why are Democrats running away from other Democrat adjacent content creators who are saying it? People like myself. You need to lean into this. This is where the base is across the board. You're never going to win the evangelical right that has unlimited appetite for death and destruction over there and love Israel.
you can win them over by talking about something else. Here's the thing. There are certain things that literally everyone agrees on. So for example, the SAVE Act, not literally, but the vast majority of Americans agree in the core tenets of the SAVE Act, which is basically that, like, if you're voting in an election, you should have to prove that you're a citizen in order to vote. The majority of Americans support that, right? So that's like one thing where, you know, most people would probably look at it and be like, yeah, I support that. You know, what other thing? I don't know, like free school lunches in public schools. Most people would probably look at that and be like, oh yeah, I support that. That would be great. So, you know, this idea that, you know, oh, well, you just got to give up catering to the right because they're not going to, you know, support you on Israel. Like, of course, the far right is not going to support the far left on Israel. Well, actually, maybe they will. I mean, horseshoe theory is legit. But, like, of course, you know, people who are extreme Zionists are not going to hold hands with people on the left when it comes to destroying Israel. But you can likely find other things that they would support and agree on. I don't know what those things might be, but there have to be some sort of issues where you can go across the aisle and be like, okay, you know, I am down with this value or that value that you have, whether it be with crimes, handling of crime, tax policy, foreign policy. You know, there are a litany of other issues that you could appeal to the right on. You don't have to talk about Israel all the live long day. There are other things going on in the world.
If you listen to AIPAC lobbyists, if you listen to pro-Israel lobbyists and people with a tremendous amount of influence capabilities that are constantly making phone calls anytime a Democrat says anything about Israel, so then you have to like manage your rhetoric around this issue in a way that doesn't offend these psychos, you are giving ground to a right-wing populist, just like Donald Trump did initially. This was the pre-October 7 election, right? Donald Trump won, I mean, where Democrats were so predisposed with a pro-corporate sentiment that was supposed to be like responsible governance that Donald Trump was able to come out and look like a more moderate figure than he actually was on a lot of issues, on issues that Americans care about, right? Like, I'm not going to touch Medicare. I'm not going to touch Social Security. I'm not going to do wars. These were all moderate positions from a Republican that most Republicans had never heard of. That's why he was able to win so much favor with like normies and low propensity voters. You can't defeat that with wishy-washy, middle of the ground bullshit, middle of the road bullshit. You can't defeat that kind of narrative.
Maybe you could literally run on that same platform again, because I think with everything going on in, you know, overseas, especially, the next president is likely to be more hawkish. Like, the next president is probably going to be more hawkish and be like, oh, you know, we got to go out there and finish what we started. Hoorah. Like, you'll probably see a lot more of that than a lot of the measured, like, oh, you know, we should stand back and stand by. You know, we shouldn't be getting into all these wars. These conflicts are useless. Like you're not really going to see as much of that, much of the calm rhetoric on the right this time around, I don't think. And that's why I think that part of that's going to be, especially if Ron DeSantis is the nominee, but also you see a bit of that if Marco Rubio is the nominee as well. Now, Marco Rubio, I think, would have a little bit more of a nuanced and measured approach to international conflict, but he's not the type of person who'd be like, oh, we need to step back from the world stage because we're too involved, right? That's not something you're going to see from the right this time around in 2028, in my opinion. So he's right there about what that core message is about Donald Trump that appealed to a lot of people. But guess what's that in there? Israel. And nobody's running around and going to Trump and being like, oh, hey, Trump, do you support Palestine? Like, nobody was doing that. And if Donald Trump said, oh, yeah, I support Palestine, you know, to the end of the line, like, I don't think that he would have gotten as many votes as he did.
Narrative. You only allow your opposition to lie about their positions if you are not making a convincing argument. If you're not even interested in making a convincing argument. If you're not even interested in hearing why they are popular. This is why Kamala Harris lost. And this is precisely why, if Tucker Carlson actually runs for office, he will come out of that primary the victor 100%, and he will defeat the overwhelming majority of Democrats right now as they stand. And yes, that even includes, like, you know, left flank Democrats as well, unless they dramatically change the way that they communicate about these issues. Specifically, be unshakable, be more convincing in your advocacy.
You know what? I wonder if he's saying all this to convince people on the left who are considering running for office to be anti-Zionist. I wonder if that's what's going on here. If it is, it might work, but it's terrible advice because it's not true. It's absolutely baseless. This is just awful. This is awful.
Do this like wishy-washy.
What's so amazing is that Israel, which at least is acting in what it perceives to be its own national interest, is joined by its shills in the United States, of course. But really, its only other ally in this is the American news media, whose job it is to tell you the truth and inform you as to what's happening, to tell you, hey, wake up. The world could be changing, and it's going to affect you and your family. That's their job. And instead, they've been lulling you to sleep with the same variety of transparent lies and propaganda.
Who's fighting harder against this war, Tucker Carlson or Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries? Not close, right? It's embarrassing to have Democratic leaders outflanked on the anti-war position by some on the right. Democratic leaders are pathetic, controlled opposition, useless, right? And there's truth to what Cenk is saying, but there's also truth to what Edgar Mentum is saying. So are you going to ever mention that there's absolutely no anti-war constituency whatsoever among the MAGA right? Or are we just going to play dolls with influencers and TV hosts forever?
No, it's because generally speaking, if like the state of America is like, oh, we've got a threat overseas, these people are trying to kill us, we need to stomp them out before we get nuked into oblivion. Regardless of whether or not the government's lying about that, they've been known to lie about things like that in the past. They might be lying now for all I know. I mean, I choose to believe them, but tepidly, I admit that the government might be lying to me about this. But the thing is, whenever the government says, oh, there's a threat overseas, they're going to try to kill us, the right always believes that. So when the right falls for that line, then they're going to be like, oh, well, we need to do whatever it takes to sort of stop out that threat. So this idea that, oh, MAGA's not, pro-war anymore, it all crumbles if you just tell them, hey, there's a big threat overseas, right? So, for example, I don't think the majority of MAGA thinks that we need to take Greenland, for example, right? Like, if you gave a bunch of Republicans a poll and said, hey, would you support going to war so that we can take Greenland by force? Like, you get maybe 5 to 10% support for that policy. But I think on the right, the right sort of has like a little bit of a clearer eye and clearer vision when it comes to war. The right, seems to have a clear head and actually understand the fact that war is necessary sometimes, right? Sometimes there are good reasons to go to war, but there shouldn't be a default to like always be on the conquest, right? Trying to rule their nations. I think the problem with the right there is that they tend to think that there are too many things that are legit reasons for war, but still, that's one of the differences between left and the right.
To which I responded with, I think about this a lot. Tucker's platform is large, and I always assumed it was MAGA, but 85% of MAGA loves the Iran war. Does this mean that independents and Dems are watching Tucker now? Is MAGA still watching him and just simply disagreeing? Matthew Hasan says, I know lots of normies who watch Tucker now for his anti-war, anti-Israel content, which is true. I see it too. I'll get on a plane sometimes, and the motherfucker sitting next to me is watching Tucker Carlson. Now, of course, I'm sitting in business, so maybe that's the reason.
Yeah, it's part of it too, probably.
Seeing it out in the wild, right? I don't see Tucker as a realistic populist candidate for the right in 2028, just neocons and losers and probably after Trump. Tucker Carlson is the only...
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if a neocon became president of the United States. I think that just basically means like a liberal, but just like a little hawkish on foreign policy, maybe having right-wing social values, but in general, just like having liberal political values, I think, if I remember correctly. I listened to Albert Mohler break this down some months ago. But I wouldn't be shocked to see a neocon become president of the United States again.
Path for salvation for the right. Maybe J.D. Vance might have a shot at it, but much more limited shot at it. Tucker Carlson is the true spiritual successor, the MAGA movement. He is the only one who is capable of carrying the base. I said that for the last decade almost, okay? I've been saying that nonstop. I've been warning about Tucker Carlson since 2016. He is one of the most dangerous right-wing figures in this country. J.D. Vance is awfully quiet lately. That's because he has ambitions for 2028, and he knows to shut the up right now, because if he was held responsible for what's going on right now, that's a horrifying reality for his prospects, for his 2028 prospects. If Tucker won the presidency, do you think he would actually decouple at least distance from Israel? I don't know what he would do, man. I think he's a grifter at the end of the day, so I don't know. But the way he communicates on these issues is like, do you want to live in a country that is a objectively white supremacist fascist state, purging 65 million people that Tucker calls migrants, you know, that happen to have a Latino background, but also simultaneously we have maybe decoupled from Israel? I think that's a really dangerous gamble, because a lot of people will take that.
Interesting. That's horrible analysis. Horrible analysis. These top comments: Tucker Carlson versus Gavin Newsom is the ultimate nightmare scenario. So the interesting thing is, you know, was saying, this is from ZapDog, saying Tucker Carlson versus Gavin Newsom is the ultimate nightmare scenario. The interesting thing is, like, the far left would hate Gavin Newsom. Like, I've got a friend who's about as far left as it goes, and you know, he does not like Gavin Newsom, but you know, I explained to him, like, hey, it's a Riz contest. Running for president, it's a popularity contest. Gavin Newsom has the Riz. And with the advent of Donald Trump and the media's attacks on him, you know, Trump is literally Hitler, right? So, Gavin Newsom ran his country to the ground, but is he Hitler? No. So, you know, the bar is so low now when it comes to, like, scandals that, like, someone like Gavin Newsom could skate on by. And that's not even to mention, like, the Zionism or whatever. I think that that's a non-issue for people in the center of the aisle. Let me see. Is anyone else calling out Hasan Piker for this terrible analysis? Literally nobody in the comments section is calling him out. But I mean, I guess that makes sense. You know, considering his audience, you know, I don't think that a lot of them would be, you know, stopping to think and be like, hey, you know, maybe that doesn't make sense.